What's up, everybody? Circus here, coming at you with this week's Riot Report. We're gonna be taking a look at the new meta as it's shaping up here. We've had a lot of stuff going on for real this time over the past week. So where to start? I'm gonna start with Zexal Weapon. Why not, right?
Zexal weapon, still unknown if it's a meme or if it's a real thing. We honestly don't know.
Yeah, yeah. It's just to that point, huh?
It's tough to say. It's obviously it won a tournament, but regardless, so it could be the most prestigious tournament. It could be a free to play tournament. You should never take results off of one tournament because there's a lot of factors that go into play. And this one being no one knew what Zexal weapon was. And a lot of people just kind of gave it to him for free. You know, they just kind of swung into him and just gave him Zexal.
Right.
So it's hard to judge how good a skill is when it's just accidentally being triggered when it's totally, playable around. It's not like Destiny Draw. Destiny Draw wasn't really a problem until Battling Boxer Veil came out because it gave them the ability to get Destiny Draw without actually dropping. They take the damage and then they just summon the Veil and they're good to go from there.
Right.
Where before it's like if they see Sphere Karibo, they can play around your hand and not necessarily lose right away. Can't do that with the Zexal weapon. And then by the time you do trigger Zexal weapon, if you use so many resources getting to that point, it's just rough to kind of establish an Exceed board after you've used all your resources. So most of the times they have like 2 cards in hand and they're like just top decking and just replacing it with ZWs and then never really getting anywhere with the weapon. So still undecided. We'll see. We did have one top yesterday. He ended up DQing, not showing up to his game, which was very weird. But it is what it is.
That is kind of weird, isn't it?
Yeah, it's still in the balance. It is a very powerful skill. I also think that there's going to be a deck better than Teller Knights that can use it. I think Teller Knights is just one of the decks that could abuse it. Now that people have seen it, they could work on things. Because there's also someone brought up in the comments that there's level 5s and level 3s in the ZWs. So
yeah, yep.
There's a possibility that something like that can happen with the skill. It's a very powerful skill, don't get me wrong, but the activation requirement is what's worrying to me about it becoming meta.
It's too easy.
Definitely one to keep an eye on, and definitely don't swing into Yuma anymore for if it's an automats, right? They definitely treat it like a Yami Yugi situation, and if you do, most people have had really good success with it. So
all right. So how's the water deck doing then? That was the dominant deck last week. Had like 5 or 6 tournament victories. What are we looking at now?
Yeah, the water deck won a lot last week, but this week I don't think it's picked up a single tournament victory. I think top 4 is as high as it's gone. The water deck is notorious for being a weak, oppressive deck, right? Like when it's the best deck, it's kind of like, oh, okay, so it's going to be one of those metas that's flooded good deck or flooded with rogue decks because it's a deck that runs out of steam very quickly. It'll set up its board. And then if you break it, generally speaking, they're done. There's not really much more to come back. They use their 2 territory, the Sharks, and they're donezo. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of how the meta adapts with that. All the meta decks right now, definitely none of them feel as powerful as full power Dark Lords, or not full power Dark Lords, but the Star Seraph Dark Lords or the full power Blue Eyes. So that's good for rogue decks, I think. But we'll have to see kind of where they go from there. They definitely took a dip this week. I think they're still going to be on the power rankings, but I don't think they're going to take first place.
Water deck? Really?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen, but we'll see.
Then why did it win so many tournaments in one week? Just nobody knew what to play, or?
No one knew what to play. A lot of people were still playing, like full on Blue Eyes, which Blue Eyes does not do well. I think what's really been affecting the meta is people's perception of Blue Eyes White Dragon as a deck. A lot of people came in after the ban list thinking Blue Eyes would still be the best deck of the format. Spoiler, it's not at all. It did win Meta Weekly, which was pretty good. But just, again, because it wins one tournament doesn't necessarily mean it's all of a sudden the best deck. If you took a look at the Meta Weekly, by the time they got to like I think it was, I don't know if it was the second most represented or the most represented, but by the time we reached top 16, there was only like 2 left in the whole tournament. And it just happened that one of them made it all the way to the finals. And if you watch the games, there was a lot of TTH BS going on, So, it's not even necessarily that the deck won on its own. And I think the data across all tournaments pretty much shows that. There was a battle phase where it was Blue Eyes was the most representative deck,
Hmm.
I think at 7 tops over anyone else. And not a single one made it to the top 8, which means even though it was the most top represented deck, it didn't get a single power ranking point that tournament.
Oh wow,
Um,
yeah.
and I think it's one of those things where we just have to admit it. Konami made a good ban list. They hit the deck in a way where they didn't kill it. They made it more fair, and this is kind of the consequence that we're seeing.
Right.
But everyone still has Blue Eyes, so that's usually the second or the most represented deck when it comes to just entering the tournament with it. And the crazy thing about Blue Eyes White Dragon is when we were in a Fire King dominant meta or a Water dominant meta, regardless of which either one, Blue Eyes was able to adapt their build to kind of counter that. They can't really do that because they don't have Melody.
Oh,
So
okay.
not having Melody means you can't play the turbo build. The entire idea of the turbo build is discarding your stones, quickly adding your Blue Eyes, playing more ancient rules, faster alternative dragon, and Melody literally stops all 3 of those by not having it. And if you do decide to play Melody over the Azure Eyes, then you just lose to Harpy Lady, like just straight up. So
Hmm.
it's I think Blue Eyes and obviously Dark Lords exiting the meta completely, just kind of let Waters take over, and then of course people still playing Blue Eyes even though it's kind of proven not to be the best deck anymore. Let Waters kind of thrive because they have like that good Blue Eyes matchup if they don't play the turbo build, which they can't. So
Right.
I think that's kind of what made Waters take over. It's also kind of the simplicity of the Water deck. It's kind of like that Shiranui syndrome that you just play your cards, set your back row, and you'll win if your opponent doesn't have the proper
Hmm.
Hey Trunades or Cosmics or whatever.
Right.
And that just kind of it's the simplest deck while the meta evolves. But now as more and more complicated strategies come out, of course Fire King's got Tinky as well, which is an amazing card for them. It just boosted their consistency by a crazy amount. And Fire King's looking really good. I mean, but they're going to be a little bit more difficult to play than something like the Water deck or a Blue Eyes deck. So it's kind of up in the air. I don't feel like there's any single best deck right now. I think it's a collective of decks and what they have in the side deck.
Well, since you brought up the fire deck, and we do have it on screen right now, what's the big change with them? Was there something holding them back in the previous meta, or is it just the addition of one card here?
Yeah, I mean, being able to search your Arvada is so huge for that deck or Barong,
Hmm.
because once you kind of get your opening cards, you can search everything else in the deck. So it's basically when Noble Knights got Merlin and were able to search their entire deck. This is kind of a similar situation. Now they're just able to search they just have another searcher that lets them make their deck faster. And the Fire King deck, once it gets going, it is very difficult to stop the constant explosions, the Michael Bay effect that
Hmm.
you have coming out of it. So yeah, just getting into your Arvada faster, getting into your Barong searches faster, lets you get into that Fire King zone faster. And once you get locked up in those destructions, you're going to need a DD Crow or a Necro Valley to out it. Otherwise, you're just going to be losing your board every single turn.
Having this extra searcher, then is that why we're starting to see more 30 card builds? I mean, we
Yes,
saw
yeah.
that before, but there was always kind of like a debate between 20 and 30
Bricky
cards,
and
right?
stuff, yeah, and
Yeah.
and they always have to play the hand traps too, and they still do. They still do play the hand traps with the Yami Yugi, but definitely, now it's like way more consistent because the moment you draw your Tinky, that's it. You're unbricked. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Or if you don't draw your Tinky, you can draw any of your other 9 starters. So it's the
Right.
same
Right.
situation with Crystons and Noble Knights. You get so many starters that you can just play 30 cards, and the chances of you bricking and actually losing off a brick ultimately don't matter because you're in a best of 3. So statistically speaking, a back-to-back brick shouldn't happen. Even though that did happen in the battle phase finals, and he still won anyway due to his opponent's
Right. Right.
misplays. But you know, it is what it is.
Yeah. Don't attack into that attack position veil, right?
Yeah, don't do that. That's the
Yep.
cheese that's going around right now. People think that Vale will always come out in defense and just swing without really thinking, and then like midway through the swing, you're like, wait, that's an attack mode.
Yep.
So I'm surprised that happened in a tournament setting, but hey, the timer, I guess.
All right. Last deck, Harpies. Where are we at with Harpies? Are they just always going to be that second place deck? I feel like.
Yeah, the existence of Poisonous Wind kind of
Hmm.
forces that, I feel. Obviously, they are adapting by putting things like Harpy's Hunting Ground, either through skill or by adding it in the deck with Perfumer. But I feel like any wind deck, it's kind of like with machine decks, right? Machine decks, they get screwed by system down.
Right.
Because if you're like a light deck, for example, you have Light Imprisoning Mirror. That's a 1-of in the entire game. Poisonous Wind is a 3-of normal card.
Right. It's a lot
It's
easier to get.
pretty unfair. So in a side deck format, it's just hard for Harpies to ever be extremely dominant. So I think it's always going to be kind of that, yeah, just second place deck. It's not a bad deck by any means. It can out the Poisonous Wind, but just having to deal with it in the first place, while other decks don't really have to, because they can just draw their outs to the 1-of Floodgate. I think that's just always what we're going to be kind of looking at. It also doesn't help that more and more, like, they just have so many niche counters to them, like the Patriarch card. Who the hell even?
Right.
I forgot that thing even existed. And it's like, how are you losing to this? And it's like, well, because for whatever reason, Konami decided to make them all Harpy Lady.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, shoot.
And
So
their problem is they don't have a lot of room to tech, right? I mean, we see them running 20 to 24 cards depending on the build, but even with that, they don't have a lot of room to like mix in Cosmic Cyclones and things like that.
yeah, I mean, they can. It's not like it's not as tight as other decks for sure. But I mean, everyone's going to be playing the 3 channel or 3 perfumer, the Elegant Egotist, the Harpy Lady ones. Like that core is always going to be there, and it is a little bit larger than most of the standard ones. But I don't know. It's one of those decks it's probably a good thing that it's not the best deck.
Oh, because
It
yeah,
would just be one of those, like,
just gross.
yeah, Shein comes out and negates, you can't play, and that's kind of the same
Yeah.
thing with the slash, to a lesser degree. But it feels like a fair deck right now. All the decks, to be honest, feel like a fair deck. Minus, I think the only unfair thing is Battle in Boxer Veil when it comes to like
Right.
D-draw and stuff. But outside of that, the decks feel very, very, very fair right now, and I think that's why we're seeing so many crazy finals. Yes, Waters continue to win the finals. Fire Kings, like the people winning the tournaments, continue to be the same decks, but the actual 2 decks that end up in the finals has been really wild.
Yeah,
Like
it's been different
Six
this week.
Samurai and
Yep.
TG and all these things, and I believe if the meta continues to settle, we're going to see more and more spicy things kind of come up. And I'm really interested to see Zexal Weapon, right? Because Zexal Weapon, I think we're just starting to see what it can really do. But the most important part is, how do we trigger Zexal Weapon when our opponent is smart,
Right. Well, we're gonna start seeing Cosmic Cyclone on those decks, almost guaranteed.
Yeah,
Right. Almost
or some
guaranteed.
sort of maybe a pointer to get the guaranteed 2K, or
Right. Something like that. Yeah.
I don't know, something.
Mirror Wall. Mirror Wall.
Mirror
There you
Wall.
go.
Oh
Mirror
my
Wall.
goodness.
You watch. You watch.
All right, I'm ready for it.
All right, guys. Let us know what you think of the meta right now. It's definitely still in flux. This is always the most exciting time, is post ban list, but before people get it all figured out. So, and the box obviously didn't really add a lot to it. So we'll have to wait for the next one to see if that mixes it up a little bit. But we're gonna get out of here. But you should get in the Discord because it's free. The tournaments are free. The new player help is free. Right, come up with a witty quip right here. Perfect. We'll see you next time. I'm Circus. That's right.
Free to play Lunalight.
I guess that is a joke in itself. We'll see you next time.